Hello, benevolent beings. I'm going to offer you some insight and healing support today about anger. So this video is going to be a very personal video for me. Sometimes I'm sharing information and insight using experiences I've had supporting other people in their healing and growth, and sometimes I'm going to be offering you very personal information about my own learning and healing journey, and this is one of those videos. Today I'm going to be talking about anger, and anger is something that I've done a lot of work on over the years, and I can really say that I really get it now, and I have a new relationship with anger, and I've used this information and this insight to support other people with this work as well. I'm a Reiki practitioner, and as Usui Reiki practitioners, we have daily practices that we use, and one of these practices involves meditating, doing a special kind of meditation called a gasso meditation. But then we also tell ourselves every day 5 Reiki ideals, and they are: just for today, I will not worry. Just for today, I will not anger. Just for today, I will be grateful. Just for today, I will do my work honestly. And just for today, I will be kind to every living thing. And the idea is that we don't commit to, I'm never going to be angry ever again. It's like every day we get a new start, and we make a commitment to ourselves that today I'm going to do my best with all of these things, that all of these things are really important for me as a person, but especially as a person who intends to hold healing space for others. So for me, to not worry was actually really easy. And I know a lot of people struggle with worry, and this could be a whole other video that I offer. But for me, just for today, I will not anger was the one that every time I said it, it felt like a lie, because I would tell myself, just for today, I will not anger. But I knew, but I probably will have anger today, because a lot of days back then in the past, before I did this work, I experienced a lot of anger. I was easily triggered. I would have outbursts. I was still this person who went for Reiki sessions and did yoga and meditated and spent time in nature and worked on grounding myself and all of these things, went to counseling, but passion is big in my life. And that is something that my shaman taught me a long time ago. She said, Michelle, you can't have passion for the good without experiencing it on the negative side. I'm a passionate person. I'm really passionate about helping others, about learning and teaching and supporting people in their growth and healing. And so that passion that I have, that fire, also shows up if somebody pushes my buttons. If I were triggered, then the response to that would be just as big. Lots of fire, lots of like defending myself. And that really, it still bothered me, even though she helped me understand what it was about me that I was experiencing. If you're also a passionate person, you know what I'm talking about. Or you could be someone who struggles more with worry, but doesn't actually get angry very easily, because we're all ruled by different elements astrologically. So not everybody has as much fire, for example, but could experience, more anxiety and things like that. Or you can have both, because anxiety can actually show up like a pretty significant irritability. So people who have anxiety will often act angry when they're anxious, as a means of trying to like control a situation so that they can feel safe again. So that's another element, and magnesium can really help with that. But I'm going to talk less about that today. And we're gonna go back to anger, being triggered, people pushing our buttons, and what to do with that so that you can live a life that has less anger in it. So I can honestly say that where I am today, I don't feel like I am a person who experiences a lot of anger anymore, but it's something that in the past I would go to my support people and my healers for a number of sessions about this, and I really learned a lot by reflecting on it myself, and I had my own pretty profound healing experience all on my own that I want to tell you about today. And it's really personal, but I shared this story because it was one of the most significant healing experiences I've ever had, and it changed who I am. There was a very clear difference between who I was before this experience and who I was after. But it was also one of the hardest things that I've ever gone through. And so I share that as a word of caution, because if you're going to do this work on your own, I think it's really important that you pre-establish who your support person is going to be, so that you have a touchstone to be in contact with when you're doing this work, because it was really painful. And that's what I wanted to make this video about. So what do we know about anger? When we have an angry response, it's because somebody has triggered us. Somebody or something, a situation or an experience with a person has pushed our buttons, and we're reacting to that. What is this button? This button that is getting pushed is an old wound. It is an experience from the past that significantly injured our light body, and we continue to carry that wound around with us. It's just dormant most of the time. We don't even know that it's there or that it's affecting us until something happens where a person comes into our experience or a situation happens that pokes that wound. You can have two different people who experience the same thing, and one is not triggered and the other one is. Why is it? Because this person had an experience that left a gaping energetic wound as a button. And so what happens is that a person will come in and poke the button, and then you get the anger shows up, the response, because it hurts. And so we're defending ourselves, but all of this happens on an unconscious level. So one of the most important things to know about this is it's partly our responsibility that this person or the situation even comes into our experience in the first place to poke this. If we didn't have the wound, if we didn't have the button, this situation probably wouldn't even happen. We are unconsciously going around and poking each other's wounds to help each other wake up and heal. It's like, oh, you have this button. I'm just unconsciously going to push it to let you know that it's there. You didn't know this was there? Now I'm letting you know this was there. Because when you do healing work and you heal these wounds and take them off and the buttons no longer exist, your interactions with people actually changes. And you can see it when you do big healing work, especially with the support of a healing practitioner. It's pretty amazing. Like after a session with somebody where you do significant work like that, you'll go back into engagement with people that you would normally be with, and they behave differently. And it's like they don't even know why. Like something has changed. They don't know what it is. You almost wouldn't know what it was without knowing that this can happen. And they don't push your button anymore because the button doesn't exist. So that's the first thing. But what it also tells us about anger is that anger is not really anger. Okay? Anger is not real. Anger is a response to pain or fear. Always. Anger is pain or fear. So our angry response is our reaction to pain or fear. I'm repeating that because it's a really important part of this. So now I'm going to get to the story. Let's get to a real life example of my experience with this. Some of the details are actually really hard for me to recall because I've done the work, and that's really normal. When you have an experience that imprints you energetically, you carry that around with you. And so at any time you can tap into that energy that you carry about it. You can tap into it and recall it and tell somebody exactly what happened word for word. When you release this and you heal it, there's nothing to tap into. And so chunks of my story are actually missing. I was thinking about this earlier. And so I'm just going to tell you what I do remember about the experience, and the parts that are related to the wound I can't find anymore, and I'm actually really happy about that, but you'll still get a lot from this story, I think. So this was years ago. I was experiencing anger on a regular basis, not out in my everyday life, but especially at home or in those really safe places with those people who are really good at pushing our buttons. Things would happen and it was really bothering me. I was like, why does this happen? Like, why can't I just for today, I will not anger? I also don't believe in suppressing emotions. I think when we don't express our emotions and release them, they stick in our body and they go to different organs and can make us ill. And so I also took a little bit of issue with just for today will not anger, because I was like, well, I'm not going to pretend I'm not angry, even if I could, which I wasn't somebody who could do that. Because then where does that anger energy go? We know as energy practitioners, it would go to my liver, my gallbladder. The stress of it might go to my heart, my head, things like that. So I was really grappling with these Reiki ideals and wanting to buy into them, but struggling with it. And so when I learned that anger is always pain or fear, I told myself, okay, I'm going to try to experience my anger differently. And I'm going to explain how that went. So a situation came up where my family and we had gone away for, I don't know, like 4 days. And we took our dog. And our dog was a senior who had neurological symptoms already. She had muscle tremors and mini seizures. And so when she got fleas, I didn't want to put neurotoxins on her. That was something that I felt really uncomfortable with. And so I was looking for all the ways to treat a flea situation naturally. And I found what worked. And then we went away for 4 days. So we left the house. We treated the dog. I think I was using coconut oil on her, which killed a lot of the fleas. And then before we left to go to someone else's for the long weekend, bathed the dog at a dog bath place away from home, and then went. So she was flea free. When we came home 4 days later, any of the fleas that were in our house, this is so gross, but we resolved the issue since then. Life happens. So all of the flea eggs, or the remaining fleas that were still in the house, they were starving and they multiplied. And so we had no idea what we were coming home to. So we came home to this really stressful life situation. And I remember it just being my husband and I. We came into the house and immediately it was so gross. There were fleas. And we could see them on our legs, and it was like nothing I've ever experienced before. And so I'm sure you can think of situations in your life that are like that, where something really unexpected happens that can be really stressful. So our nervous system is responding to this stress because it's gross. What are we going to do? We go and, people can get really anxious and think worst case scenarios and it being out of control. It's all root chakra stuff. So we go to work, we leave the dog outside, and I remember my husband was vacuuming downstairs in the basement, and I don't remember what I was doing on the second floor, like on our main floor, but we were doing everything we could to remedy the situation. So like vacuum the fleas, empty the cans outside. And here's where a piece of the story is missing. I remember going downstairs to say something to my husband, and he was in such a stressed state that he said something to me that like it really, really pushed a button. And I remember feeling the anger come up because I just came downstairs to ask something, I don't remember, and he hurt me is how I experienced it. So he pushed this button. I immediately felt the passion, the fire ignite. And what we normally do in these situations where somebody hurts us is we want to hurt them back. And so this is where people get into fights. So it's, you hurt me, I'm going to push it back on you so that you feel the pain, and then they push it back on us so that we feel the pain, and this can go on, and then nobody feels good. And so I made the decision in that moment that I was going to stop this pattern. And so when he pushed my buttons and I felt that like rise of energy got really, really big, I decided like I'm not going to hurt him back. because this isn't about him. And I removed myself from him. We finished taking care of the situation in the house, but we stayed away from each other. And because he knew back then that like anger was pretty big for me, he also knew to stay away, which is one of the greatest blessings of this experience, because I don't think that I could have done what I did next had he come back into my world. It was all I could do to contain this energy. So I sat in it. I sat by myself and I was so mad. It was so big. And all I could think about in my head was about him. I had all of these different feelings about him, all of these things that I believed were true about him that justified my anger towards him. And I was trying to tell myself, it's not about him, this is pain. What hurts? Like, what is the pain? But my story kept saying, no, it's about him. And I can't remember what it was, but it might have been like, he's so selfish, or I don't know, I don't matter. I really can't remember because the wound isn't there anymore. But the story in that moment, it was so real and it was so big. And all I could think about was all of the things that I would say to him if he showed up in my space. And I reacted the way that I used to react. So again, if you're not somebody who experiences a lot of anger, you might not be able to relate to this. Maybe you know somebody though who maybe live with somebody who has a lot of anger, and so this can give you some insight to what's going on for them. But if you are somebody who experiences anger, you probably, this might sound familiar. So this story kept running in my head, all of the things that I wanted to say to him. I wanted to push the energy back. I did not want to carry this. It was too big and too ugly. And I just kept telling myself, it's pain, but it didn't feel like pain. It felt like anger, and it felt like it was his. And so I trusted that it was actually pain, even though I could not feel it that way. And this went on for hours. It was terrible. I was so mad. Normally there would be relief to a degree that comes with the release of this by engaging with somebody or having some outlet, and instead I made myself sit in it and try to feel it as pain, and it wasn't working, and it took hours. And then it was bedtime, and I still stayed separated from him in my own space. I couldn't have faced him. It was all I could do to contain this energy. And I finally was gonna fall asleep, and I remember thinking, I hope that I just wake up and this is gone, because I honestly can't even deal with this. Like, I don't know what else to do. I know that it's pain, but I cannot feel it as pain. It still was all about him only. It was his fault, all of those things that we tell her that feels so true. And I did fall asleep. And when I woke up in the morning, I was still so mad. And I remember them being so frustrated because I didn't know what I was gonna do with this. And it still felt just as big, and it was still anger towards him. And I really wanted to fight with him. He went to work, we didn't see each other. And I remember it was sometime into the morning, it did flip, and it flipped just like a switch. It's unbelievable to me. This I can remember so profoundly because I've never experienced anything like it. It immediately switched from being anger to pain. And it was so drastically different how it felt that I couldn't have made it about him if I wanted to anymore. It was instant, and it was still so big, but it hurt so bad. So now if he would have come in my world, my interaction with him would have been very different, because I couldn't have made it about him now if I wanted to. I could feel the wound and exactly what it was about. Now, this is another part of the story that has lost its energy, and so I can't tap into it, and I'm really okay with that. But I remember that the pain was a story from my past that had to do with a mother wound. And so he had triggered this mother wound by exhibiting the same kind of behavior to me, or something that it re-woke this old belief or story from a past experience. So whatever happened in my childhood that hurt so bad, that felt so true, and that's just my experience of it, he did something to wake it up, right? So he pushed that button, and the pain was like, it was so big, like fetal position. How am I gonna get out of this big? And so then it was like, this isn't better. And all I could do was sit in it. I tried to think of like who I could reach out to like pull me out of this pain. But I think part of the pain was actually about being alone, and feeling like I didn't have someone to go to, which again is just part of my story and my belief system at the time. And now I know it's not true. So in that experience, I really did just have to sit in it. And I can't describe in words how excruciating it was, and it lasted for hours. And so as I sat in this pain, crying and, you know, like just trying to get out of it, and we really resist pain. That's another video that I'll do sometime, but our natural tendency is to distract ourselves, numb our pain, climb out of it some way, and I couldn't, and I just stayed in it. And then eventually I had a panic attack, and I didn't know that that's what I was having at the time, because I was so caught up in this, and it'd been a really long time since I'd had a panic attack. But I remember it was hyperventilating. I could not slow down my breath. I felt this like squeezing on my body. I got hot, and I remember like rocking on hands and knees and all of those things. And it was like, I couldn't catch my breath. I could not slow my breathing down, and I was so uncomfortable. And then it passed, and I experienced bliss. It was like, whatever, this pain that I had came to a head and released. And it was like the panic attack was the thing that like squeezed the energy out, because that's what it actually felt like. It felt like something was squeezing around my body so that I couldn't breathe. And I remember the bliss that came, and I laid down and put my head on the pillow and just went to sleep, and had an amazing sleep. And when I woke up, I was better. And since that experience, I just don't experience anger anymore. And all of those things that were true, that I believed were true from these old wounds, they don't feel like a part of my story anymore. That energy's gone. It's no longer sleeping on my energy field. I released it. I healed it by sitting in it, and I'm not triggered like I was anymore. So it is possible for me that this one really big wound was the thing that was getting triggered most of the time, that made my experience hard, that made me experience a lot of anger. And so yeah, today it doesn't run the show anymore. I don't feel like I'm an angry person. I no longer go out and seek support about anger. And it taught me a lot about anger. And I think that we all could benefit from understanding that when people trigger us, when they push our buttons, it can be a gift that shows us that we have work to do, that something still hurts that's running the show. And are we gonna keep carrying this around for the rest of our lives, or do we want to do something about it? And so if you relate to this and you want to do this work, number one, I have to say, if you're going to do this the way that I did it, you know, it concerns me that you might experience pain as big as I did, because it's my spiritual belief and my faith that really helped me muscle through it. I could see how some people in that kind of pain could end their lives. And that frightens me to even suggest that people go there. And so counseling is really important. Working with healing practitioners, good quality healing practitioners that you trust, can be really beneficial. And then finding at least one person in your world who can be a touchstone for you at times of crises like this. Doing the work can be really hard, and I'd like to believe that there are easier ways to do it maybe than what I've done. But if you do choose to sit in the mud and sit in a pain experience, know that it will release, and muscle through it. Find your support people, which can be really hard if your wound is like mine, where you have this belief that you've got to do it on your own, which I think a lot of people do. You've got to find that person who can help you through it. You have to hang in there, and the bliss comes after the work. And I'm so grateful that I muscled through that one. It was relatively short in the grand scheme of my life, but you don't know when you'll get through it. And so that can be really, really hard. I will tell you that a couple of days, it might have been even the next day after that experience, I felt so good. One of the things that I do for myself is I'll often take a day trip to the big city where I was born. I'll go to Toronto just for the day, ride the public transit and people watch, and go get reflexology in Chinatown and have a bubble tea and things like that. And my experience that day was one of my favorite experiences in my whole life. I was all on my own, just like taking it all in, and I experienced oneness like I have never experienced in my life. And I long for that sometimes. I could really experience every single stranger that I crossed paths with as another version of myself. It was, if I, put a toonie in the cup of a homeless person, it really felt as if I was giving that toonie to myself. If I saw somebody who was angry and laying on their horn, I could find humor in it a little bit, seeing that as myself. If I saw like the oblivious person who was kind of like didn't know what they were doing and kind of causing chaos, I could feel compassion for them as I experienced them as if they were myself. And so this was a really enlightening experience for me, because my pain was about being alone. I remember that now, because when it flipped over, what I experienced was oneness. If we are all one, then it is like being alone, all one, alone. We are one. And so the pain part for me was that feeling of being alone, and then the bliss that followed was the oneness. So anyway, that's my really personal experience, fleas and all, which no longer an issue, is totally remedied. But yeah, that's my experience with anger. And now I can do my gas home meditation, and just for today, I will not anger, feeling really good about it, that I'm not suppressing emotions that might make me sick, but that I understand them better, and that anger no longer is like a dominating force in my life.